Welcome to the Impulse Spotlight, a podcast for product development professionals. In this episode, we meet with the Vice President of New Product Design at PlayPower, Inc., the world's largest commercial playground and recreational equipment manufacturer. Prior to joining PlayPower, our guest spent 20 years creating award-winning products for consumer product manufacturers, including Tomy International, Newell Brands, and Stanley Black & Decker. Outside of work, he's an avid outdoorsman enjoying activities like hunting, fishing, running, camping, and hiking. Joe Palermo leads a team of designers, engineers, and project managers bringing new and innovative play equipment to market under the PlayPower brands Playworld, Miracle Recreation, and Little Tykes Commercial. A graduate of the University of Cincinnati, Joe now resides in Massachusetts with his wife and 8 children. Joe is passionate about inclusion and is most proud of the teams he's helped build and the people he's been able to empower, allowing them to grow while doing something they love. In today's episode, we take a look at the Playhill playground equipment by Playworld, breaking down multiple teams of people who combine their ideas and efforts in order to produce the exact layout desired by their client. Outside the actual design work, Joe also highlights other elements of their product design, such as preparing assembly instructions, technical documentation, and meeting safety and compliance standards. Join us as we peek behind the curtain and take a look at the industrial side of making a fun park for children. Let's get into it. Hey, Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Troy. Excited to be here.
Sure. So I always start out by telling everybody that I started Impulse almost 26 years ago. Worked for another product development company that had all facets of product development under one roof: industrial design, engineering, prototyping. And this was back in the day when prototyping was like new age technology, tooling, and everything. So how did you get started in product development?
Well, it's interesting, and I love to ask everybody that question too, particularly in my field. So I'm formally trained as an industrial designer. I have learned over the years that my story starting out is kind of unique, actually. I feel like most people find out about industrial design from a high school guidance counselor or something, or if they're lucky, maybe. A lot of them go into similar fields, engineering or architecture, and say, hey, eventually they discover somebody that said, hey, you ever heard of this field, industrial design? And they're like, no, wow, well, that's what I really want to be doing. And it's this roundabout thing, right? But I come from a family of 8 kids. My oldest brother, who's 12 years my senior, actually went to University of Cincinnati for industrial design. Okay. He started there when I was like 5 or 6, and I already had a creative bent as a kid. I was always kind of, definitely drawing and sketching a lot, but building things, just to make robots out of cereal boxes and things like that. But, I had my young experience of sketching cars with him and his college roommates when I was 6 or 7, I think. And so I was kind of exposed to it very early on. I'll say probably spent the better part of grade school and high school doing other things, but knew I was always interested in it. So actually went back. My family had moved to Connecticut, but I went back to the Cincinnati area for college to go to UC because I knew they had such a good program. So that kind of kickstarted my experience. University of Cincinnati has a great co-op and professional practice program that allows you to work in a range of different environments before you graduate. So I worked for Hasbro doing toys for a couple quarters. At the time, it was the Kenner brand that was still in Cincinnati before they moved to Pawtucket, Rhode Island. I did mailing systems at a company called Pitney Bowes for a while. I worked in the car industry for Daimler Chrysler, and actually my last time around in school in co-op, I worked for my brother's consulting firm. By that time, he had his own consulting firm in Atlanta called Formation Design Group, and really enjoyed that, trying out a range of different industries, very fast-paced, really cutting my teeth and growing my skills as a designer. So that kind of dovetailed nicely into my first professional experience, which was in the Boston area where I live now. I worked for a firm called 11. And so had some early consulting experiences, eventually moved over to a company called Newell Brands and worked at a few different divisions there. I was about 10 years total. when they would merge with another company I had gone to. I did hair care appliances there. I did some outdoor products, some tool stuff. Spent about 6 years or so doing small kitchen appliances. And for 5 years or so after that, I did baby products with a parent company called Tomy International, but with the First Year's brand mainly here in the Massachusetts area. And when I started out in that experience, my wife and I had 5 kids, so was definitely living and breathing that stuff at home. Gave me, if not the insights to the great ideas, definitely an appreciation for the great ideas, I'll say. And I've been in the commercial playground industry for going on 2.5 years now. So
cool. Yeah, I was going to ask, what's your current role and what kind of products are you developing these days?
So I'm the head of innovation, essentially the vice president of new product design for a company called Play Power. We make, I say, everything commercial playgrounds related. We have 3 major North American brands: Playworld, Miracle Recreation, Little Tex Commercial. We also have a brand in Europe called Hogs. We'll do anything related to the playground space, including site amenities. We do indoor play equipment as well. We'll do shade structures, almost anything you name it related to parks and recreation. We also have a company called Easy Dock that does those big rotationally molded floatable docks that you see at marinas and things like that. And that's an interesting competitive advantage to have for rotomolding in the commercial playground space. But they're specifically commercial products, right? So we don't do any of the kind of kid craft, or maybe it's I forget the name of the company that does some of those wooden residential playgrounds that you have in your backyards.
Right.
I would have guessed that the industry existed before I got into it. Certainly the age range of my kids now, and by the way, now we have 8, so I have a young newborn, and we do have two with special needs in there. That gives me, I'll say, some special insight into the world of commercial playgrounds, where we're trying to design for the absolute broadest range of needs within a community. Having that age range of kids, so my oldest is 15 and a half down to the newborn, I joke with everyone that we have all the age grades that we talk about within the industry covered in my house, but we've certainly spent a lot of time at the playgrounds over the years. And again, I could have guessed that the industry existed, right? Everything that you and I interact with that's man-made has been designed, whether we're aware of it or not, right? I probably couldn't have pointed out any of the brand names to you. And to this day, they're probably mostly B2B facing brands. But if you look closely and you start to pay attention, you can see some of these brands, and maybe 1 or 2 very savvy people might know some of them. But having been in it for 2.5 years now, it's an absolutely fascinating industry. It is B2B in the sense, at least for Play Power, and I think most of our competitors, we sell our products through distributor sales rep agencies that are their own independent houses, that are a range of characters, I guess I'll say, in and of themselves. Some of them are just kind of newly getting started and might be mom and pop or 1 or 2 people that are maybe just doing sales. Some of them come from a background of contracting and installations and are more savvy with that. Others of them are more turnkey, kind of full service product developers, and are really managing brands of their own. So it's interesting. It is B2B in that sense. So you buy a commercial playground from one of our dealers, not directly from us. Our end user, or customer, sorry, I should say. The end users, of course, are the kids and the parents and everybody else who's going to use the equipment, right? But our customers tend to be parks and recreation departments and municipalities, schools. We do products for early childhood in that 6 to 23 month range. So those are the big kind of age grade segments. It's generally 2 to 5 years where a child's kind of developing their their minds and bodies until they, have a certain level of athletic and social prowess, if you will. When they come into about 6 years of age, they're coming more into maturity in their brains, and so 5 to 12 years is the other big age segment, and then 6 to 23 months at the early end. So we're selling indirectly through those other parties to those end customers, and then ultimately, obviously, the kids and parents and everybody are the end users of the equipment. But there's so many layers of design within this industry. I think one thing that's important to point out, I suppose like other consumer products companies that I've been a part of over the years, we have a catalog of products. In past lives, those things have become less and less relevant as anybody can find your products online, right? And things like that. But the catalog is still pretty important to us with our stakeholders. They'll keep it on file. If they're calling us back in a few years, the Parks and Rec department, for example, they want to make another playground. That's usually kind of the first thing they go to. But a lot of these staple things, whether they be slides or swings, we keep in the catalog for years and years. They're built to last years and years, but we do upgrade them and innovate them over time. So it's my team is really the team that I'll say is designing the Lego blocks, if you will. So we make those initial pieces, and then when I came into the industry, I'm hearing all folks from all different angles and points across the product development cycle telling me they're designers. What does that mean? We have people that specifically design the CAD blocks then that allow the pieces that let's say my team makes in SolidWorks or designs or finishes the engineering of, then they make actual CAD blocks that can go into our proprietary CAD software that allows our reps to design the final playground, right? And then we have a team of people that just does pre-designs that we offer to the reps. Like, here's some suggested configurations for these different needs or for these ranges of play events, things like that. And of course, we have outside partners like landscape architects who are designing the broader park environment space. They, of course, are designing, and they oftentimes can be very picky and will spec specific brands and specific types of equipment that they want to see in the ultimate playground environment. So there's all these layers of design that make it very fascinating, I suppose, like the entire rest of and I'm just talking about the physical product design, right? I'm not even talking about marketing copy or anything editorial graphics or anything like that. That's what kind of fascinates me the most. But it does fall to my team, the original innovation and the play experience. Much like all the consumer products I've worked on over the years, that's what we are focused on. And so the team that I lead includes industrial designers like myself, includes mechanical and structural engineers, all the SolidWorks modelers and drafters. We do all the data entry into our MRP systems that allow things to flow through our factories, and our design and engineering teams are co-located right there in the manufacturing space. So that's great. It gives us the ability to build things very hands-on and interact with the people that are making them. We do all the technical writing for what are oftentimes very extensive install guides that are equivalent to a book. Sometimes, if we're delivering a large piece of equipment, it's not as if we just finish the innovation and hit print on the injection molding line or something like that, and then ship it to Walmart, Target, and Amazon, and it's anything but that. Not only are we delivering something to you sometimes that is as large as a building, but we don't know who's going to be putting it together. It could be a group of people just with some impact drivers that has never made a playground before. So we got to give you very specific instructions as to how to assemble it. And we do try to make that as easy as possible. So I've been surprised, actually, the level to which much of our stuff is completely pre-assembled into full-blown weldments. So you're not doing so much of that scavenger hunt and type of thing out in the field. But then you're going to offset it with kind of the freight costs and the logistics of all that, right? So but we write all those very detailed install guides. We do, of course, have graphic designers that are doing any on-product graphics, and we have a number of different play events and panels that involve, graphics, prototypers, people that specifically are building our full-scale functional models. We have product safety and compliance specialists within the team. There's it's a heavily regulated industry, similar to baby products, which I was doing before. And I mentioned the parent company I worked for, Tomy International, did toys as well. And we always used to talk about how different those two businesses were, right? In some ways, it was, I think, part of Tomy's business model to have the stable baby products industry alongside the toy industry, which could be much more frenzied at times, given different fads and things that would become popular and ebb and flow. But one of the main differences was how heavily regulated baby products were, for good reason, right? People are very concerned about the safety, more so with anything than their newborns, infants, and toddlers, right?
Sure.
But in a public playground space, it's extremely important as well. So we have an ASTM standard for playgrounds, similar to some of the different categories of baby products, and everything that we make is certified to that standard. There's an outside third-party group called IPEMA, which I think is the International Playground Equipment Manufacturers Association, that certifies to those standards, but it falls to my team to put in all the final documentation and applications for those certifications. And then we have project managers that manage everything soup to nuts. So one of the things I'm most excited about, on top of just getting to do the original innovative ideas, is having that kind of complete oversight over the entire process, and the ability to kind of innovate and make sure that things are being done right all the way through the entire process. So.
Sure. You had mentioned, it sounds like your playgrounds can almost be modular. Like you said, that the distributors can kind of come in and design their own. I assume they're not designing the nuts and bolts but they can pick and choose features and things like that to add on.
100%. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find any two playgrounds that we sell. I mean, you can.
Oh, really?
That are, I'm going to say, that are, 100% alike. They're almost all different to a degree. So that's a lot of the magic of it. I think you hit it right on the head, Troy. And with this product I'm going to talk about today, that's one of the biggest challenges that we had, was we got a new and innovative idea that we want to get to market with very quickly, right, that everybody's so excited about. We can't wait to show it to the field. But we want to come out with the full suite and compatibility with all these other things that we make right out the gate, so they don't have the limitations that might, I'll say, limit the early adoption curve. So.
Sure. Just real quick, we'll get into that product. One more question. So when they design their playground, you have to then make the instruction manual or the installation manual after that. So is it pretty custom every time, your manual?
It can be. Oftentimes, I mean, if they're pulling from existing equipment, so we'll pull those different pieces of it into one set of documents for them. But yeah, and actually, if there's one other nuance that's worth mentioning right now at this time, my team also does all the engineering for our custom playgrounds. There's a separate team that does the upfront concept design work at Play Power for fully custom playgrounds, but that's a thing in and of itself. So in addition to offering all this standard catalog equipment that reps or customers can pick and choose from and make their own playground, we also offer fully bespoke, if you want your playground to look like a giant elephant, or you want it to be celebrating this local sports team with this mascot or anything, we can make that kind of, I'll say, clean slate solution for you. And the design team is doing constant proposals, reacting to things out in the field that people want. And it's kind of a growing trend too. I'll say these mega play spaces that we're building, that it's not just, maybe a merry-go-round or a slide and a seesaw, out in the grass or something like it was maybe when we were younger. Some of these play spaces that we're building today, I call them veritable amusement parks. And if you live within whatever you consider reasonable driving range to these, I mean, it's free. It's the public play space, and your kids have access to a tower with 38-foot slides coming out of it and all these other amazing things. It's so fun. It's amazing area of the business to be involved with, but it's also an incredible amount of work. And same thing applies there when we deliver those pieces of equipment to our customers. We have to write very detailed install guides, even for those, even as much as they're a one-off, to allow them to be successful in the installation in the field. So that's another, I guess, unique aspect of the team. And as I said, my team does all the engineering for those custom playgrounds as well.
Very cool. So tell us about the product you want to talk about today.
Yeah, so we just launched this. It was on July 19th of this year, and that's going to be part of the story, right? The timeline. I already said we were very excited about this idea and how quickly could we get it to market. But the product is called Play Hills. Throughout the internal development process, we were calling it Hill Play. Certainly was inspired by the experience of playing out on a real hill in nature. Human beings have climbed on mountains for millennia, as we say in the launch video. The experience of being king of the hill, all the different things that you can do on the hill, pulling on roots, climbing up. We wanted to kind of recreate that with, let's say, standard and most times when you hear that word in the industry, if I say traditional play equipment, means steel fabricated play equipment. So we kind of replicate that experience in nature with traditional play equipment. But the reason that we wanted to do that was to make it that much more accessible to people. I'll say before Play Hills came on board here, it was a big trend in the industry to build these and it still is, to build these earthwork mounds, involves a lot of grading and compacting, and not every one of our rep agencies or installer groups has these capabilities, by the way, but it's certainly not a revenue stream that Play Power was participating in. It's a lot of work to create these kind of mounds in the earth and then ultimately probably layer those with artificial turf in a play space. And not every space that you're working with has the ability to do that, at least cost effectively. So we wanted to be able to offer this play experience with traditional equipment for that reason. And then I would say as we got into it, we discovered so many great things about it that you could do that you couldn't do with the earthwork hill, right? First of all, I mean, one of the top priorities for it, obviously having that soft feel of the natural grass. So these are lined with artificial turf, designed to feel like real grass. There's a combination with a lot of other materials, not the least of which is perforated sheet steel, but we have roto-molded sensory components along the way, some kind of musical drums and things like that. And we even use little molded mounds of our poured-in-place rubber surfacing. That's like another soft textural event as obstacles and touch points up the hills. They have ropes built in. There's handholds built in. All these different things that kind of accentuate the original play experience, I'll say. But one of the best things about it is when you have a prefabricated hill that's a ramp or a platform, more or less, then you can do all these things underneath it. So you can have some of those same handholds underneath, and they can have the experience almost of bouldering underneath there. Or we have hammock. I think there's a hammock under one of them, and basket swings and things like that you can do underneath. And all of a sudden you have this whole underground sort of fort-like environment that goes with it too, which kids love, and it creates all these unique kind of social spaces. The base of each hill is also angled right at transfer height for a kid or anybody in a wheelchair to be able to transfer easily. in and out of, get up onto them, which is something that's more difficult to do without the kind of prefabricated structure. And then you asked before about modularity. One of the things we built into this from the very beginning, and you'll hear the term in the commercial playground industry, post and platform or post and deck. All the brands typically have these. And if you go out to a public playground, you'll see these kind of post and deck systems with railings. And it's one of the ways that, having ramps up onto those structures, that you can be very inclusive and allow kids in wheelchairs and with all range of needs to be able to come in and play in these spaces. We have a 5-inch steel post platform system and a 3.5-inch platform system that have standard deck heights, and the play hills are made to be used right within those systems. They're made to be used right within a recent line of products that we've launched called Ropescapes, which are rope climbers. They can be built right into that. This is all done under the Playworld brand, and the Playworld brand, one of our recent flagship products is this one-piece slide called the Mighty Descent. It's made of one piece of rotationally molded plastic in this giant machine, and has the ability, we call it the social slide, like 5 or 6 kids can kind of go down it at a time. Happens to be the same kind of size and configuration and relative angle as any one of these play hills. So it can be swapped out in a configuration with one of these play hills. So it's got all that kind of compatibility built into it from the very beginning. But some of the reasons I think it's game changing for the industry, on top of it being that prefab, no assembly sort of solution that I mentioned, and no expensive earthworks. It's definitely got a unique value to places that they may be relatively flat environments out in the plains or down in Florida or somewhere where there's not a lot of hills, right? I think urban environments can be a challenge to have some of this kind of topography there. So it's a great way to kind of get some of those, some of that kind of play experience to some of those maybe underserved communities in that way. So we're really excited about it.
That's really cool. So I'll put links to stuff in the show notes, but just for our conversation, is this like a one big dome piece, or is it more like an angle or a slope that's bolted onto another piece? Like, can you kind of describe what it looks like a little bit?
Yeah, so it's all of the above. I mean, picture like a big, I don't have the dimensions right in front of me. I want to say it's maybe 5 or 6 feet wide. It goes up to an 8-foot height, and the overall bedway, if you will, if I was comparing it to a slide, is probably 11 or 12 feet long. So It can be as simple as, and we created these hubs to kind of go in the middle of them if you want them to be freestanding. And I was talking about them being modular just now. I'm saying, imagine that ramp-shaped climber just bolting right on to one of our post and platform systems. So you can put it on an existing system. It can be freestanding with one of these hubs that we have to go in the center. And in that sense, it would almost be like a ladder going up to the top of it. Or you could climb up the hill and then go down that kind of center hub, or you could go up the center hub and maybe go down it. And then there's a variety of shapes of these internal hubs. We created one of them that's 3-sided, so 3 of these play hills can kind of go up to it. And actually, that was one of the design team, I'll say, has had this idea going back for a few years now. When I first started in the studio, we had a scale model of it that we typically build these kind of 1/12 scale models in the studio out of Bristol board and cardboard and pipe cleaners and all those kind of different things. We might be some 3D printed parts on it, a lot of hot glue in this case. But we had a model I'll never forget of the original kind of hill idea that was almost like this pyramid sort of shape with the hills kind of coming up to each other. And then you can ask the question, what do you do with those corner fill areas? And that's something that we're looking at now as well. But the short answer, the answer to your question is, we have these hubs that are built so you can make an entire freestanding unit. It could be as simple as one hill that, again, looks kind of like that angled bedway with a ladder going up to it, or it could have 3 or 4 or 2 or 3, sorry, in this case, hills going up to it, or it can be bolted onto your posted platform system. You can mix in these other play events like the One Piece social slide that I mentioned. And so it's very diverse in terms of the number of different things that you can do with it. And certainly when you get the number of different hills kind of coming up to each other, and that's where you really can get that kind of like king of the hill type moment,
Sure.
and allow some of those different things to happen, right? So
Yeah. How many? It sounds like there are different units, I guess, for lack of a better term. How many different pieces are there?
So I gotta probably, I don't have all the information right in front of me to go through all the features and benefits of the entire product line, but first wave of these products, there's about 5 of these different prefab hills that range in price. The agility trail is, I think, is kind of maybe the agility or the rail trail or one of those would be more of like our opening price point. We have some that are close to being just a singular surface of turf kind of going up at an angle. This agility trail has I think we were calling it a scramble net. That's a net structure that's kind of built some 11 or 12 inches up above that surface that the kids can do interesting things on. It's in this grid pattern. They can kind of work on their coordination and strength and creativity as they move through that or slide underneath it, kind of thing. The Alpine Trail has a little more of some mixed in features of those like rubber tri-mounts that I mentioned, and handholds, and all of them have kind of these different like obstacles and things that you're, challenged with utilizing or going around as you go up. There's a product called the Rail Trail, which has these 3 banister rails on it that you can kind of hang on and pull yourself up. Offers kind of that kind of daring opportunity. And then there's these 2, I'll say, higher end ones that are they have like this almost triangular breakup of perforated sheet steel that you can kind of see through and get a completely different feel on, mixed in with the turf. And on both of them, I think the structure is made to kind of angle outward like a pyramid at the top, and then it's a little more convex or concave, towards the bottom. But they have a mixture of different sensory elements and angular grab bars and rope kind of handholds on them, to just offer a range of experience as you go up. And some of those roto-molded plastic elements are kind of musical, like drums that you can bang on and things like that. And then, of course, we have the 2 hubs that I mentioned. There's the 2-sided hub, the duo hub, and the tri-hub. And then there's an adapter, actually, that offers the transition point, but also creates the physical adaptation to those post and platform systems. That's kind of the original line that we're talking about. Now, it sounds simple, maybe those 7 or 8 products, but then all the variants of them, and all the hardware and all the different things that go into making it compatible with all those different systems was really the engineering lift that we had to go through. So
Sure. So with all the products Impulse has helped develop, like every development journey is different. Can you walk us through kind of the development of this and kind of the steps involved to get from that idea you had, what I think you said 3 years ago, to a finished product?
Yeah, and so like many of these things, right, the idea itself is floating for a while, and before we commit resources to it within my team, I'll say, and put it on our roadmap and say, here's when we're going to start this and here's when we intend to finish it. Our typical development cycle, I'll say, is about 12 to 18 months. We have a milestone process, much like many other companies, probably very similar. If you've seen any sort of stage gate process, it starts with our milestone 0, and we have a project brief and a business case, and maybe in a very early concept or that scale model that I mentioned, right? Then we go through milestone 1, at the end of which you freeze your concept. Milestone 2 is design freeze. Milestone 3 is your engineering freeze, and then getting to milestone 4, which is your final production launch. Again, in a typical program, I would say that, and especially for a big program like this, it would range about 18 months. this project was very unique in terms of the reception that we were getting on it from a very early point, I'll say, even maybe before our play test. And one of the things that's unique about our process, I mean, every product or every company does their own version of consumer insights and research and testing, right? But we play test everything. So the first thing that we do when we feel we have a really good idea, and virtually everyone across the team has good prototyping skills to be able to pull this off, right? And we'll typically build it as close as possible to with the real materials as we can, but we'll weld up, a minimum viable sort of model, and then immediately invite kids, especially the range of kids that we know are our target audience here, to come and play on it and beat it up. And we'll see real quickly what's working, what's not when we have that play test. But I'll say, actually, here is one of the examples where we knew we had a really great and a really unique idea even before the play test. Definitely by the time we got to the play test, though, it was clear this was something that was going to be a big hit for us. And I'll say, going into our collective sales meeting with our outside rep agencies in the early part of this year, I think it was late January or so, we're sharing that concept at a higher level, and even with some of the results of the play test, and the reaction to it was, so staggering that, and paired with our, I'll say, aggressive growth targets for this year, it was an ask at the CEO level, how can we launch this earlier? What do you guys need to make this happen? Which was a very interesting challenge, right? It was already an extremely elaborate lift, and a complex idea, and a ton of engineering as it was. Then to let's say, how can we maybe bring this in 3 months? Because we had sort of planned on launching it at the big industry trade shows this year. There's two major trade shows in the industry, one of which is NRPA, the National Rec and Park Association show, and the other one, ASLA. They both happen in about mid-October timeframe. So those are kind of planned to be our big launch moments. But the playground business is a little bit seasonal. As you can imagine, the warmer months is when the bulk of the activity is happening, whether it's sales or installation. So we said, and everybody agreed, this had the ability to move the needle on our volumes and our targets that we could hit for this year, as well as if we could hit the peak season. Can we get this out by midsummer? And so I went back to my team, talked through the challenge, and it was a challenge. Just working through the engineering lift and how we could deploy our own resources, I'll say, smartly to get there was a big part of it. But arguably the bigger part of the challenge was bringing all the cross-functional stakeholder groups together to kind of have that same conversation, right? So we needed the proposals team and the CAD team that does those CAD blocks to do all their stuff to have all the assets ready, because what good does it do us to have these things conceptualized and then not have people be able to actually put it in their proposals and their designs that they created? We needed the marketing team to kind of create all the assets that would explain the features and benefits, that would tell the story of the products. We needed the operations team to be ramped up to be able to make these and to have all the different things in their system and all the instructions and documentation from my team to be able to do that. So it was calling all those different cross-functional groups into, I'll say, kind of a scrum process, even at the senior leadership team level, where we started, looking at this and reporting on this project on a weekly basis, presenting it to the even to the CEO of the company at least monthly, to kind of scrum and get it there to the finish line. And it's an experience I'm tremendously proud of, that we were able to do that. We have a couple things that we're still getting on board as part of a progressive launch, but the meat of that product line that I just described to you is now out there and orderable to the broader world, and we are seeing some very promising early response to it. So excited.
Good. That's awesome. What was the final timeline? Was it 18 months, or did you bring it down to less than that? Or?
I had to mention, the idea being floating for a while there, until we actually put it on the roadmap. We, our timelines inevitably become more real by the time we get to milestone 1. As you can appreciate, that's when you have a real concept and you really understand what you're talking about. So our milestone 1 was in September 21st of last year. So if we brought it down to July, and usually there's three months before milestone 1. So let's say I give it that, then we probably hit close to 14 months. Which again, for a big project like this, we would have typically been 18 minimum. So yeah, pretty proud of the team for the ability to pull that off. And there are things that we are tweaking and learning, but that's true of any product even that we would have just launched. So
sure. You had mentioned the challenge of getting everybody together from a design standpoint or engineering execution. What was the biggest challenge you guys had?
From the engineering execution? Well, so even at the point of design freeze, I'll say, when we had passed through that play test, we understood essentially what we were offering from a play experience standpoint. There was still a number of different technical solves that had to come about, and I'm not going to go into great detail about them. These products are both utility and design patent pending at this point, not the least of which was how we were going to adhere the turf to these prefabricated and welded steel structures, right, in a way that could withstand all the rigor that it needs to out in the field, whether that's the elements or vandalism or just repeated wear and tear and kids playing on it. But that was a big technical hurdle that I know we were worried about and had as an unknown going into the engineering phase, into milestone 3. Then there's even these unforeseen hurdles that can kind of come up along the way. I mentioned that everything that we do is generally goes above and beyond any of the safety and compliance standards for the industry, but these products were intended to be global from the very beginning too, and there are some differences between the European, which is what is called the EN standard, and the American standard, the ASTM, and even the Canadian CSA. And as we intended to be able to fully be able to support these items in Europe, one of the things that came up in the EN standard, in order to remove any shadow of a doubt of these things being considered what's called a ramp, where then you have to have a barrier or a guardrail or a railing on the product. Anything above 38 degrees unequivocally would be 38 degrees. I'm talking about the angle of the hill, the pitch of the hill itself would unequivocally be considered a climber. So we did make the decision midway through, I'll say, when we had them at about 33 degrees or so, to put them right up to the 38 to remove any shadow of a doubt in that regard. Now, when you've already produced the level of engineering documentation that you have, I think that decision meeting, that scrum meeting that we had on that particular decision point was back in March of this year. So 3-4 months before launch, that really threw a wrench into our bucket. So that's another example of some of the challenges that came up along the way. And again,
that's really so that's quite the pivot late in the game. So
yeah, absolutely
awesome. Just changing gears just a little bit as we start to wrap up. What are some of the trends that in your corner of the product development world? What are some of the trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I talked about a little bit of we did in the overview, talked about the niche part of the public playground world on custom, right? I think that those trends towards mega, I'll say, bespoke, custom solutions is a huge trend right now. Whether you're seeing larger than life giant towers, I think there's some of this almost like public community or town or city envy sometimes that goes on. Well, they have this awesome thing. We want to build something even better and then have it be an expression of our community. And that's great. It's certainly great for the equipment manufacturers. for the larger industry as a whole. And then you see people building things that are glow in the dark now, right? I mean, playgrounds are traditionally a daytime thing, and we want them to be, right? We want the kids to be healthy and go to sleep at night, but there's also warmer climates where it's god awful to even be out there sometimes in the middle of the day. So if you can offer that benefit, it's interesting. And you're seeing, I think, more one of the things that I love about the commercial playground space, it's very old school in this way, generally very low tech. People are coming to these spaces to unplug, to take a breather from the technology and just the deluge of information and everything that they're maybe overexposed to throughout the rest of the day. But that being said, there is a time and a place for digital experiences, whether we're talking lights and sounds or things like that, and some of the interactivity that offers. There's some very interesting things that we're doing, and if we were to do a podcast like this next year, for example, we might be talking about one of them that aren't just games, and certainly not addictive sort of games, but maybe nature-based experiences again. Play Power is doing some really exciting things along those lines that I personally am very excited about. Inclusivity has been a trend for a long time, certainly well before my day, but I'm so excited about all the different things that we can do to appeal to a range of needs and maybe approach that in a different way. I think over the next couple of decades, you'll see things that allow, let's say, someone with a visual or a hearing impairment to be guided through a space in a different way with some wayfinding technologies and things like that. Sustainability and recycled materials is coming into this industry in a huge way, and it's coming into everywhere, right? But I always say, we're putting our products literally, physically out there in nature, so it behooves us to kind of be on the front lines of that. You can see, and it's very palpable if we're not using, let's say, environmentally friendly materials, to be out there putting them into the environment. I think you're going to continue to see some very interesting things come into the commercial playground space, as far as people being able to use recycled ocean plastic or things like that. And for the most part, Play Power, with our core as a traditional kind of steel fabricator, and a lot of the products and raw materials that we use are recyclable from the beginning, and they're locally sourced and things along those lines. But it's going to continue to be a very growing trend. And then I expect as well this kind of fast to market trend, and how can I get this entire new building in 12 or 14 months or something won't abate real quickly either, and we'll continue to have to meet the needs of that as well. So, but just make sure your day and your life that much more challenging, right? So
that's the only problem with being successful and doing one so quick, that now they know you can do it.
So, right, you're a victim of your own success. Exactly.
Yeah. So cool. So reflecting on all the challenges and successes you've encountered over the years of developing products, what words of wisdom would you share with somebody looking to make a significant impact in the product development world?
Yeah, absolutely. And I get asked this question a lot. Certainly, being in the field of design for 20 plus years, as I have been, and I mentioned to you, I was exposed to it at an even younger age than that. And I'm always keen to try to help people along, especially early on in their careers. I would say the top thing that I would say is to prioritize learning above all else. Everything else can kind of come with time, but make sure that you're in a space that's challenging you, that's pushing you out of your comfort zone. When you're either learning or you're dying to a degree, right? So keep going forward, keep pursuing those kind of new learnings and new challenges. Don't go it alone. I would say, if there's anything, the second thing I would say would be believe in the power of that team. That the team that when it comes to unlocking the real innovation. I mean, we didn't talk about all that much. The innovation with Play Hills is nothing new to so many degrees. It's like part of the reaction to it was amazing to see everybody like, oh my gosh, like why didn't I think of this? That is the reaction that you usually have, I think, to a really great idea. This is so obvious. Why didn't we do that before? But having that exact group of individuals that's there at that point in time when the need comes along, or when the specific insight is finally there that can act on it, and that has the proper experience to go and do that. I would never underestimate that portion of it, building the kind of the right team, as in, in the sense that most of those things that we consider new and innovative today are really just new applications of existing materials or paradigms or experiences, right? So it often comes down to assembling just that exact right group. So yeah, I would say prioritize learning, and be collaborative, go after the right team. And if you're an entrepreneur, same thing. I mean, I think this is advice, it's not based on, being part of a corporate design environment by any means, but go out and find those people that have that missing thing, or that bring that special thing to the table to make it happen. So
yeah, those are good. Awesome. This has been great. Before we finish, is there anything else you want to mention with regards to the product or product development in general?
Well, I would say just, whenever you're being asked to do something fast, like the story that I just told, and even if it's one that everybody's excited about and you have every reason to be successful, there's always going to be challenges that come up along the way. There can be a temptation, I'll say. There's always a temptation to try to take shortcuts, right? In my experience, though, there are no silver bullets. And that's true of innovation. It's also true of your careers. Don't go on a wild goose chase trying to find some magic solve for something, or even something that, where you feel like it has to be absolutely perfect, right? Just start creating, just start doing something, start getting your hands dirty, start doing things that make you happy. And, more than likely others will find value in it, and you'll always have a following, and you'll come out with something great on the other end. So.
Yeah, good stuff. Where can people find more about the product if you're interested?
Yeah, so I'll send you all the links, Troy, if you're able to put in any of this in your notes or whatever. Yeah. Actually, I'd love to send you a list of the team members too that were involved in this project. I know I said it to you from before we started the recording, but this was not so much a personal story of innovation as much as a huge team effort and a huge development story. But you can find the full line of Playhill's products and all their features and benefits and descriptions on playroll.com. There's a great video there on YouTube, I think, that is linked to there. You can follow us on all the socials. If you're so inclined, talk to your local rep or people in your community that are interested in building a play space and ask them to look into Playhills. I mean, give them my number if you want. Tell them to give me a call. So.
All right. Awesome, Joe. Thanks for doing this.
Excellent. Thank you.
To learn more about Impulse and how we might be able to help you, visit impulseproductdevelopment.com.